Welcome to another Early Years Learning podcast. My name is Jackie Ward and I'm the founder and managing director of the Early Years Learning Hub. This episode is one of our series titled Practice Sharing, and today we are discussing the higher levels of teacher accreditation for those teachers who are interested in becoming specialist teachers as part of their career progression. I'm delighted to be joined by Deb Williams, who is an inspirational, multi-talented early childhood professional and the very first teacher in New South Wales to be awarded at lead teacher level. Deb, would you like to tell our listeners a bit about your professional journey and yourself?
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, delighted. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you my journey today and the process that I've gone through and provide encouragement to others. Well, my journey started at 15 years of age, many years ago, as a Sunday school teacher. And at 18, I was working in vacation care, running a vacation care program. And then following school, I completed a full-time 4-year degree through Macquarie University, a Bachelor of Arts and Diploma of Education in Early Childhood Education. I then moved from home thinking I would change the world and worked in a private early childhood education and care service on the South Coast, working in a preschool room of 20 children as the early childhood teacher with one part-time helper. I cleaned of an evening, as you did in those days, did my program plans and evaluations of an evening, ate and slept. Following 6 months, I moved to Western Sydney and worked in a community-based service. This was my first experience of child protection issues, and I really developed close relationships at that time with the Department of Community Services. And I remember a report I made at 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon for a little girl in the service, and the JIRT team, the Joint Investigative Response Team, was on the doorstep by 5 p.m. I commenced in the role of an early childhood teacher at this community-based service, and within 6 months moved into the role of director of the service due to the director misappropriating service funds. I stayed in
Wow.
I stayed in the service for 8.5 years and really enjoyed my time and the relationships that were forged with the team, with the children, with the families, with the community at large. We held fetes, we did lots of community events, and I really know I made a difference there. Not only to the children, but with the team and the local community. And following this, I moved as a result of my husband's work transfer into the multicultural community of Springvale in Victoria as a director of a local government service and remained there for 6.5 years. I then returned to Sydney for family reasons and moved into a local government role in children's services for 8.5 years. Really enjoyed my time there, really supporting services and team with professional development, educational program and practice, policy development, networking with the local community and broader community as well, and really supporting services in terms of child safe and health practices. During this time, I developed relationships with the University of Western Sydney, started in inputting in terms of lecturing in early childhood programs. From there, I was seconded to the Department of Community Services for 6 months to work in a licensing advisor role, which was a great opportunity to really capture and document best practice and share that with other services. And then in 2003, I had the opportunity to establish a service, a 40-place community-based service in the Hills District, stayed in the position of the director of that service, and developed another service in Queensland in 2014. And during this time, I really became interested in research. I completed a graduate course with James Cook University by correspondence. And in 2012, when the National Quality Framework was introduced, I was fascinated by the term critical reflection, because the NQF identified that we need to critically reflect on our practice in order to improve our practice and outcomes to children, families, and communities. Well, I was fascinated about critical reflection. I researched nationally, internationally, and I couldn't find any specific information on how to implement this practice of critical reflection. So what do you do when you're so challenged but to embark on a PhD to find out that answer? And I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to actually do that, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to do that. And then from February 2021, I had the opportunity to become a casual supervisor with NESA to help teachers working towards proficiency, working with Community Early Learning Australia as a facilitator and really supporting services in quality improvement and professional learning, professional development. Moved into then a casual compliance role, where I really became, in 2023, July 2023, I moved into this casual compliance role, and then became very aware of the importance of the Australian professional standards for teachers, and really looked at my own practice in light of these standards, and then looked at the HALT policy, and was delighted to find that the Australian professional standards for teachers not only extended to primary and the high school sector, but then were extended to the early childhood sector. And I was delighted at that. And then really looked at, well, what does this HALT policy in early childhood education and care look like? How can we promote this with educators, and how better to do that than to do it on myself? So after completing my PhD in 2020, I then straight away launched into this process of HALT accreditation. Through that process, I realized that the HALT accreditation process in itself is a critical reflection process. It's a great process to go through. It's not without its challenges, and it takes a really big commitment. But in itself, it's a critical reflection process in itself. It forces you to think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you can improve. And it also helps you to focus on what is your impact. We all like to know that we're making a difference, but this causes you to really reflect on that and to be able to measure what impact are you having? What impact is your practice having on your colleagues, on the children whom you're educating and caring for, on your families, and on your service and local community. And you can think about how you then can improve. So in itself, it's a professional learning activity. And this has been a great process for me to go through. And as a result of this, I've reflected on my practice and looked at then the opportunity to actually develop a course for early childhood in the Graduate Diploma of Early Childhood and Bachelor of Early Childhood for a university college. So I would encourage anybody to go through this process. And I know Jackie will talk in a minute of how to do it. How do we do this process? And I'll share that with you in just a moment.
Can I jump in there to just say, wow, wow. What a very rich and, I don't know, magnificent journey that you've taken. And that's one of the reasons why I get everybody to share their professional journey, because I think, wherever you want to be at the end of it, it's all of these little steps that you take along the way, the little experiences that you gain from here and there. And you mentioned a few examples, child protection, all these sorts of things that equip you to be the professional you are sort of at the end of your journey or along the way. At your next stage or your next choice, and you've talked about a range of different roles that you've taken on. And I did see the press at the time when you were awarded the lead role, and I thought, wow, I was in a policy role at the time, so I wasn't eligible, but I thought to myself, wow, that is a great opportunity for someone who isn't necessarily interested in moving up to leadership or management of people, which I can definitely say after 30 years of doing so, I'm over that. But I've come back to teaching and I love it. I love working with the children, and I was interested myself to think about what a great opportunity that is for professional growth. I mean, you might not necessarily get any financial reward or any other reward for it. It's a little bit like that idea that maybe when you go on to do a further qualification or whatever, it's really for your own professional growth and journey, isn't it? Yeah. And so thank you for sharing all of that. That was really amazing. And I also just wanted to say that I'm in awe of your energy, because you did this on top of raising a family and, like just working, and, you've always had such a bright attitude. We met, for the listeners' benefit, Deb and I met when you were at Sealer, and I worked there as well at the time. And I've just always known you to be so positive about everything and every experience. And it's really lovely and refreshing to hear someone that's really so, just so enthusiastic about what you're doing and so committed to continuing to learn. The other thing I just wanted to mention before we go on any further, thinking that this is, this podcast could go out to our international audience or in other jurisdictions, just to note that there's differing accreditation practices across Australia, but they are all related. The Australian professional standards are national. So what we're talking about here is the process might be different in each state and territory, but the standards themselves are the same across the way. Would you like to talk a little bit about the different levels and what your experience has been? Because like you, myself and yourself, we came in and had an automatic, I think, from memory.
We came in, because we trained in those early days. I finished in 1981, and so as a result, you came in and you were automatically accredited at proficient teacher level. In the state of New South Wales now, that's not the case. So teachers need to compile their evidence in a number of areas and submit that to NESA to become a proficient teacher within a number of years of becoming of completing a teaching degree. So you can come in at a conditional level. You then work towards proficiency to become a proficient teacher, and professional development is part of that. And then you have the opportunity, should you choose to do so, to become a HALT. Now, a HALT encompasses either a highly accomplished or lead teacher. And your standard descriptors within each of the standards of professional knowledge and professional practice and professional engagement are different. So, and you compile your evidence to submit to NESA.
And I think, you mentioned it in your introduction there too, Deb, about the fact that the Australian professional standards are a great, and I think so too, they're a great document. And for our early childhood teachers in this space, when Quality Area 4 talks about, drawing on professional standards to guide practice, this is a really good one. Even if you're not a teacher, I still think they're really a great way for people to think about how they are. And annoyingly, the word students is in there instead of children, but I get it. When you go across to the high school levels, they don't like to be called children, but I definitely think primary school, they could still be called children, but, you just have to turn a blind eye to that, I think. But if you can, swap it out in your mind to say children, then they're all really, really good sort of descriptors to think about whether or not you're on track with knowing how children learn, and, making sure you're catering to children with a disability, for example, or, you're making sure that your teaching is differentiated to cater for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. So it's a really great place to start and unpacking and thinking about whether or not your teaching is kind of on track. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And additional to that, in terms of articulating our practice, as a professional sector and as a professional practitioner, we want to be able to articulate to all those in our sphere why we do what we do. And we do have our national quality standards that we refer to, that we talk about in terms of our practice, but the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers provide that additional layer to say, this is why we're doing what we're doing.
100%. And I think if we're thinking, if anyone's out there and they've, already at that proficient level, they're thinking about, I'd like a little challenge, that kind of thing. I think one of the first steps that I would suggest is really getting to know the standards at the proficient level, making sure you're doing all of that well, and then starting to look at because they're all set out nicely, aren't they? There's graduate
Yes.
on the left, there's proficient, and there's highly accomplished, and then lead. So you could start thinking about some examples of some of the things that you might provide as evidence, because it's a documented process, whether or not you're going from, graduate to proficient, or from proficient to highly accomplished or lead.
And there's set evidence guides for each of those standards. So what I did in my case in terms of working towards this was I looked at the particular career stage, being really intentional about that in terms of each of the standard descriptors. Then looking at the policy, well, what does the particular current policy say in terms of what the requirements are? In my case, as a lead teacher, the policy was changed as I was working through my process, but there is a 2022 current policy now that goes through and identifies very clearly what the requirements are around that particular level, career stage. Think of it as a career stage. And there are also evidence guides in terms of what does this look like in terms of your particular documentation. If you think about assessment and rating in early childhood education and care services, you've got those three levels, haven't you? An assessor comes in and observes your practice. An assessor will discuss with you about your practice. And of course, then you've got to cite evidence. You've got to provide your documentation. Well, with the process, I gathered all the documentary evidence to demonstrate each standard descriptor. At lead career stage, you have to ensure that you've got documented evidence of every standard descriptor, which is very different to the proficient teacher process. Carefully looking at the entirety of each standard descriptor. So you've got to look at the complete entirety of what that standard descriptor is telling you, in what was done, why, and what were the outcomes that were achieved. One of the things that this process very much teaches you as you walk through it, and as I reflect upon it, is what were the outcomes achieved, both in terms of my practice. How did I show and evidence that my practice has improved? Why did I do what I did? And also to what has been the impact of that? What has been the impact on my colleagues? What has been the impact on the children and the community? And next, after that, I grouped the standard descriptors into particular sets, taking a really methodological approach to each standard descriptor in its entirety. And then one of the other requirements is that you annotate those descriptors and produce now 3 modules for submission. In the initial policy, it was that you had to submit every single standard descriptor in its entirety in terms of practice and impact in one submission. Now the revised policy is that you do that in 3 modules over a period of time. And with each module that you submit through NESA, you receive feedback on that by a NESA assessor, which is very constructive and helps you then either revise your existing work or prepare for future modules. So I would say the process in itself is very, very worthwhile. It's a professional journey. It's a personal journey. And looking back on it, it wasn't without its challenges. It does take time and you have to commit to the process. But I think it's well worth it because it causes you to reflect on your practice in a different way. In early education and care, we can get so busy in the day to day that we lose the picture sometimes of what really is our impact on these children, on future generations, on strategic direction of where we're heading. This actually causes you to sit back and think about, well, why will I do what I'm going to do? What sort of impact is it going to have on a particular practice. So it's very, very worthwhile. I think it helps you develop resilience, discipline, confidence. But most importantly, it really helps you to know that what we're doing in early education and care really does matter, and that the outcomes really produce a difference. And that in itself is really rewarding and helps you to carry on in day-to-day challenges that you might experience and encourage others.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, that it's, there might be a lot of people thinking, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. But I think if you're at a stage of your career where you've sort of done a lot of professional learning, to me, this is a version of professional learning that is next level for those people, and maybe someone who doesn't want to do a formal qualification or something. This is a really great opportunity to improve your practice, but also, as you mentioned, to document your impact. And it kind of is surely going to save you time and connect into some of the other parts of your roles, isn't it? With continuous improvement and meeting and exceeding the national quality standard.
Absolutely.
There's going to be stuff that you gather in this process that you'll be able to use for your self-assessment as well, isn't there? So there's a little bit of an overlap and a connection. Well, I think that's really been fascinating. And I'll just reiterate that it's, there's a different process in other jurisdictions, but I think New South Wales has probably the, maybe Victoria as well has quite a comprehensive process, but other jurisdictions don't necessarily. But I think, again, any way you slice it, if you are engaging with those Australian professional standards for teachers, then that's a really positive thing. And again, even if you're not a teacher, if you're an educator in a service, or it's a good thing to think about, ways of what you're doing and what you're offering through your educational program, or for your whatever you've got planned in the early years of school, that you've got, you've got something to guide you and to know whether or not you're on the right track, which I think is helpful for all teachers, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think we might wrap it up there because I think we've talked about a lot of things. I'm so happy to have spoken to you about this, Deb, because I think you've got such, a wonderful attitude, as I said before, but also rich, deep knowledge about the process, and sharing your journey and what a difference it's made to you has been really has inspired me and further pushed me in the direction of, gathering up all that evidence. So thank you.
Go for it.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of another one of our Early Years Learning Hub podcast episodes. We look forward to engaging with you in the future.